Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipster Podcast. This is your host, Jamil Hassan, the Crypto Hipster, where I interview founders, entrepreneurs, executives, thought leaders, artists, you name it, all over the world of crypto and blockchain. And I think I'm adding a new country today. My guest he's in Europe. He is the founder and managing director of Trace Labs. His name is Žiga Drev, and he's coming to us from Slovenia. Žiga, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Very welcome. Very welcome. So let's kick things off and ask you first about your background. What is your background, and is it a logical background for what you're doing now?
Well, to me it is, although it has been some 7 years since we started building this decentralized project called OriginTrail, which is a marriage between two very cool technologies. One of them, you must have guessed it, it's blockchain, and the other one is a very popular database being used by the bigger companies such as Google, Amazon, to essentially connect the world of information about products, about people. Although a centralized database, it is allowing them to essentially monopolize the world of knowledge. So what we did, we essentially took the same methodology called knowledge graph, and we overlaid it on top of the blockchain. And in that way, created a decentralized knowledge graph, which is a more inclusive, let's call it a substrate for knowledge economy, which is nowadays becoming very important for this new age of internet, where information is very likely to be even more let's say sketchy, since AI is becoming one of the biggest bullshit generators. And although OriginTrail was traditionally used in the enterprise setting, where it was mostly people who were producing bullshit, it is now being also predominantly used in the context of AI solution as an enabler for the so-called verifiable internet for artificial intelligence. What I mean by that is we're using OriginTrail for users of artificial intelligence to be able to trace back information to its original sources, so ensuring information provenance, and in that way establishing, let's call it a substrate, which is allowing people to be more equipped or better equipped to establish what is true and what isn't.
That's quickly over the past few months become one of my favorite words, is provenance. I don't want to get into that later. First of all, I want to do it at a high level. What are Trace Labs and OriginTrail all about, and why are you trusted by these large retail companies, you name it?
Yeah, so our journey was quite organic, and we initially helped companies, enterprises to establish transparency and trust in supply chains. And over the course of the past few years, we have gotten into collaboration with quite reputable and global companies such as British Standards Institution, and they're essentially a company behind many ISO standards, and us becoming their, let's say, a house supplier of blockchain solutions, including the OriginTrail protocol, allowed us to essentially deploy the same solution for helping achieve a more, let's say, resilient and more smooth international trade even. So one such example of the partnership that we equipped with OriginTrail is called SCAN. That's a supplier, short for Supplier Compliance Audit Network. This network is composed of companies such as Walmart, Home Depot, Costco, so who's who of the American importers, and they use OriginTrail to exchange audit reports on over 20,000 factories. And by doing so, you would have like competitor companies such as Walmart, Home Depot still exchanging information, and using OriginTrail they can trust each other, although their competitors exchange that information. And doing so, of course, they would not need to repeat audit inspections on, let's say, companies in China, because they decided to share information. So in that particular setting, companies decided they will not compete when it comes to product safety. So they decided to establish and forge a collaborative approach. And OriginTrail is here to catalyze that. So this is one such example where OriginTrail comes in handy in a little bit more enterprise setting.
Interesting. I think early on, I interviewed somebody from a company called The Graph, and I don't know if your graph is similar to their graph, but I wanted to find out what your digital knowledge graph is all about, how it works, and what makes it unique.
Yeah, so decentralized knowledge graph is another network layer on top of a blockchain layer. You would have a permissionless network being ran by just about anyone can essentially run a node and start hosting the knowledge that is being relayed by users. And although use cases can also be similar to the project that you mentioned, I guess our trajectory was a little bit more rooted in the real world. So we were not that much interested in blockchain transactions. We were more interested in real world transactions. So how can we establish transparency when it comes to exchanging products and services? And yes, using let's say similar formulation as the other projects, although on a different basis, since DKG is also a network. We use also the ontologies, which are perhaps a little bit more, again, tilted towards the real world use cases. And largely OriginTrail decentralized knowledge graph is a highly compatible project or a network with other products out there, such as Chainlink. Also, graph potentially could be used in unison with a decentralized knowledge graph. And the DKG is also a multi-chain project, which means that you can run a network, decentralized knowledge graph network on Polkadot parachain. You can run it on Gnosis. You can run it on Ethereum. Previous versions of the network were also launched on Matic. So it's a highly, I would say, collaborative environment. And it's an approach that we kind of foster just because we see that OriginTrail pretty much is a middleware. And through this middleware approach, we can act as a leverage to achieve many more things than just establishing a standalone solution for everything.
Got it. And the middleware part, I understand. So I built middleware for many years when I was back in corporate days. So I that's good. That's good. So I want to go back to a word that you said a little bit earlier regarding AI, and it wasn't providence; it was the other word. Is bullshit, right?
Provenance, yeah.
How are you navigating all that right now in the AI space with what you're doing?
Yeah. So if this is a recorded thing on the video, I can actually share a link with you later on. We've done a comparison between a product called ChatDKG, which is a similar interface as ChatGPT, I'm sorry, but using under the hood the decentralized knowledge graph, hence ChatDKG. So we were comparing performance between ChatGPT-4 and ChatDKG, and having asked ChatGPT a question, a very a straight question: what is the composition? I'm going to use this word, although many people don't like it, a gender composition within Nike. So we asked that question to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT provided a very vague response, and the response had nothing to do with any of the sources. So it was a blurb, it was completely made up answer, it was a hallucinated answer. And then we asked the same question to the ChatDKG, which is attached on the DKG, and we got a straight answer. So the exact composition, gender composition within Nike. And that is simply because ChatDKG uses a system, uses a methodology which we call decentralized retrieval augmented generation, which still entails LLMs. However, before LLM is being applied, the system essentially fetches the information, fetches the knowledge from the decentralized knowledge graph, and then works its LLM charms on it, summarizes or anything that is needed. And at the end of the day, user is able to verify, is able to trace back the answer all the way back to the original sources.
And that'd be capturing proprietary information, right?
Yeah. So this is where the provenance comes in. The blockchain layer is used essentially to describe information about the provenance of information. And the decentralized knowledge graph essentially stores that knowledge or links to the knowledge sources that contain an amount of data that you would want to process.
Got it. Hey, that sounds good. So let's see. We talked about AI briefly. There is a lot of work going on in the evolution of NFTs, right? How do these DKGs work in the NFT sector to, maybe become the next evolution of NFTs? Because NFTs they were JPEGs, then they went out of favor, and now they're back in a different way. So how's your DKGs work to help that?
Yeah, essentially, DKG also leverages NFT technology. What DKG carries are so-called knowledge assets, and within the knowledge assets are essentially also composed of NFTs, and each knowledge asset is being represented by an NFT, which also is then attached to a knowledge graph describing the knowledge that this NFT is associated with. So in a sense, knowledge assets could also be considered as knowledge NFTs. Knowledge assets are transferable, therefore they are ownable, and they're also discoverable because of the properties of the decentralized knowledge graph, making them discoverable. So one such thing that is getting supercharged in the NFT world is definitely discoverability. It's much easier to discover the world of NFTs if they are enshrined as knowledge assets than as just let's call them dumb JPEGs without any proper metadata. And also, I think what is more exciting is that NFTs essentially get this AI supercharging moment, because you can describe much more within these NFTs. You can use the method of vectorization, and therefore you can essentially, in the ensemble of other things happening in the metaverse, for example, you can come up with new AI generated stories using those NFTs, and then expand those NFTs into something even more exciting. So what DKG brings to NFTs is essentially this, let's call it a supercharging momentum, making them smarter and making them ready for this AI revolution that we're witnessing.
And because you make them, and because you supercharge them, what's going to be possible?
Yeah, so it's way easier to discover such NFTs, and one such instance of making essentially AI generated stories out of them is a project called Trackverse, which came to be in our ecosystem. And each story is essentially being represented by an accompanying NFT or a knowledge NFT, which also carries the entire story of that has evolved by using generative AI. And these kind of NFTs are typically, at least in this day and age, much more valuable because they can be updated and they can grow and they can essentially become and forge new stories, which is much more powerful than the NFTs of 2020 and 21.
I think forging new stories as we embark upon the bull market now, forging new stories is going to be something that's really going to be necessary, right? So 2008, 9, Bitcoin decentralized money, right? We know the benefits of that. They haven't fully played out, I think, as Satoshi's vision was, but I want to get your view on that. And then, why is it important to create, a similar decentralized knowledge sharing economy, like comparable to Bitcoin, for finance and money?
We like to say what Bitcoin did for money, for decentralization of money, we try to do for decentralization of knowledge. And in that sense, knowledge is becoming a new asset class to an extent as, Bitcoin became a new asset class, which can now be considered as a store of value, for example. And knowledge becoming a new asset class means that also individuals can become a little bit more, let's say, liberated or self-sovereign when it comes to creating and maintaining and then monetizing the knowledge that they generate. And for that to become a reality, you need that kind of a vessel as a DKG is, for creators, for scientists, even for researchers, to relay that knowledge in a self-sovereign fashion onto the DKG, whilst not losing the ownership of that knowledge. And by doing so, they can also use a spectrum of AI solutions to augment the knowledge that they have generated. So we kind of consider knowledge to be a new asset class in that sense, and Bitcoin kind of gave us, I guess, a food for thought to really start thinking about the knowledge as a valuable thing, as a commodity.
Let's say it's a commodity. You just said scientists, right? You work in certain areas. You said you started out with supply chain, right?
Correct.
You're looking to transform. Well, let's talk about science first. How are scientists and medical doctors or medical professionals using, OriginTrail and your graph to transform their industries?
Yeah, so in more specifically in pharma, we deployed OriginTrail to trace medicines, donated medicines to India and other third world countries. And this is also where not only the medicines were traced to warehouses, but also we monitored the patient application, so that the actual patients that the donated medicines were intended for received those meds. This is where in the future what we see, the records, the medical records, could be very much revolutionized, because every patient could be the one who carries the medical records, and these records are then portable to other health care institutions, which isn't the case today, not even in developed nations. We see there's a huge issue with interoperability of such medical records. When you want to, when you change your doctor, then you also need to bring in the files, which are likely still in a physical form. So that's still a huge issue. When it comes to a research, this is where I guess the technology is, I think it promises a lot, yet there's still a lot to be done, because let's call this area a decentralized science is still very much evolving. And in order for decentralized science really to evolve, we need to establish a system that will allow for crowdsourcing of knowledge. And today's systems, centralized systems, are in a way allowing for the crowdsourcing of the knowledge, but the gatekeepers that are put in place are the ones who are deciding who will actually gain benefits. Will these benefits be equitably distributed? Well, likely not. And this is in a way pushing to the sidelines a lot of talent. So in that regard, decentralized science of the future, if based on such systems, can become far more inclusive and also equitable for those who are contributing to the field of science.
I don't doubt that part. What I'm looking at, though, is here in the U.S., we have an organization called the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, right? You have all these major companies that trust you, right? How do you think that this knowledge sharing, because their process at FDA's years, go through trials and everything, and tested, and they have to become to a level of trust. How do you feel that the knowledge sharing that you offer will be able to be used by someone like the FDA, and to expedite the approval and processing of these advancements in medicine? Do you see that happening? What does it look like to you?
Yeah, I think the trajectory will be quite similar to the trajectory we witness in supply chains, where the regulation was the first thing which we had to wait for. And when the regulation brought about, let's say, serialization of the meds, this is when the companies like ours or other companies building centralized or decentralized solution could decide how to adapt such solutions to be able to sell them into that industry. So I'm not an expert in how exactly the FDA will regulate such solutions in the future, but I'm sure when the regulation will be put in place as to how this more crowdsourced knowledge can be used to develop new meds, only then we will actually see, you know, how and what we should adapt to make it possible for such solutions to be applied in this sector.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to seeing it. So,
Yeah.
another area, you know, that you worked on, that you guys are involved in, we talked about supply chain, we talked about medical farming. At least, you know, when I did some research, you guys had a blog or two or some on your website talking about you making, looking to transform farming. How do you do that?
Yeah. So we initially started by trying to switch the focus with consumers to really understand which food production is more beneficial to them for health reasons, for, let's say, sustainability purpose, where the food is coming from. Is it raised in a sustainable fashion? And to this day, we're very much focused on this consumer angle. And now launching kind of a new line of solutions based on OriginTrail, which also leverage AI for consumers to be able essentially to chat with products that they buy, and chat with products that they buy in a way that they can actually verify the information sources. So not allowing AI to bullshit consumers into doing something which wouldn't be good for them. So still using this verifiable base for consumers to interact with. And what's interesting now is that the interaction between products and consumers is becoming much more interesting because of this generative AI momentum. Consumers can ask much more diverse questions, and then even if the knowledge for what they're seeking for it does not exist in a DKG, we can later on add it and make and kind of expand and improve their experience. And in food supply chains, we've been kind of present in food supply chains since day one of launching our startup back in 2013. And food is a very interesting marketing medium also. Even nowadays, when after we have like forged collaboration with a little bit more sophisticated sectors than food or farming, even nowadays we notice that when we're publishing or telling someone about, you know, a cool stuff that we have launched in food supply chains, the traction is quite noticeable. So it's interesting to see that food is a really nice marketing medium for us.
Interesting. We go back to that AI conversation again. You talked about that. I have a concern, and you know, I see a lot of people blindly going out there using AI to make decisions to build businesses. Or AI is here. I think that people are missing the boat. I think that there's something under the hood that they should be examining. You know, that they're not. You know, and this is probably a lesson from both supply chain and farming. Like, what are people blindly or ignorantly missing out on that in this space? You know, that they need to consider before building an AI company or trusting AI for the future. What are they? What's the spot?
Yeah, I think it's the AI will definitely leave a dent, a huge dent. Crypto was impactful, but I think AI is going to be 1,000 times or even more impactful on a global society. Perhaps just because of the sheer size, and also because of the, you know, the technological advancements and talents that it so kind of brings into its vertex. I think, though, that people are also underestimating the challenges and the problems that AI is going to exacerbate, namely the challenges of verifiability, the challenge of, you know, the fidelity of the information that we consume. So I think this notion of model collapse, which will be brought about by the AI, is also going to show that, you know, not everything, or, you know, very little useful stuff can be based on synthetic data produced by the AI. Sooner rather than later, you need to root your decisions in a reality, and you need to build or utilize some form of like oracles for reality, and only then you can apply and augment the value of the information that you have produced in the real world. but without basing your decisions and just by relying and reproducing new stuff out of synthetic data, I believe will bring us nowhere, and it might like fool many people into thinking that they're actually bringing something useful to the table, whereas in fact they're fooling themselves and also fooling everybody else using their products. And perhaps we might sound as skeptics in that regard in this space, but we feel that we should first and foremost establish the ground rules, what the reality is, how do we seek truth. And even in this world where we have this abundance of information, we should still be able to somehow navigate through this complex world and establish the information provenance. And I guess I'm again like kind of promoting this verifiable web and the ability to ensure information provenance. But for us, it just seems that that's exactly what we need in this exciting world of AI.
Well, you alluded to it, what I was getting at, and I want to get to it directly. How do you think that middleware, you said you're a middleware expert, serves that role with the verifiability?
Yeah, we'll have to. I mean, this is it. It's not just us as a technologist or as a company that is going to bring about something useful to this space. There's a whole communities or even communities that are building complementary solutions that can essentially enable this verifiable internet for AI. And we building a middleware, we kind of need to understand that we can only go as far, and after a certain point we need to allow other builders or even make our solution compatible with others to actually achieve this vision for a verifiable internet. And sometimes it's really difficult to understand where that line is, because what users need oftentimes is a end-to-end solution, and in some cases we would even go as far as building the whole solution ourselves. But by and large, we try to kind of keep ourselves in a somewhat limited, so that we don't overdevelop or over-engineer, and that's why we stick to this notion of a middleware.
Got it. So right now, the decentralized knowledge society is a lot like having Bitcoin back in the day, where you held your money in a hot wallet, but you weren't really aware where the dangers were. Now everybody knows. So, a world of knowledge sharing, what does that look like to you? And what are the benefits, societal benefits, global societal benefits that could come out of a world of that decentralized knowledge sharing?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite obvious that we can reach much greater optimum if more people are able to participate in the knowledge economy, and their participation largely depends on their ability to essentially get incentivized for the knowledge that they bring to the table. So in a way, democratization of knowledge management is definitely going to elevate the optimum, and this optimum is either represented as new advancements in scientific research, more transparent supply chains, better products, better services, better government, even better media. There are so many things that can get elevated for the betterment of mankind here. So I guess, I mean, the benefits are all around. The tricky question is how do we drive those benefits without over-engineering stuff in a collective manner? Because this is not a job of one company. It's going to be a job of hundreds, thousands of builders scattered across the globe, and we try to kind of find our spot amongst those thousands of builders that can actually move a needle in favor of a better optimum for humanity.
We got a better supply chains, we have better medical, we have better media. How about a better metaverse?
Yeah, in a way, metaverse can be permeating all those sectors you mentioned: supply chains, medical data. I mean, the surgery could be performed in metaverse whilst the patient is not sitting in the same room as a doctor, as a surgeon. We even have an example of a partner that is conducting audits on foreign factories in China, whilst the auditor is sitting in his office in London using augmented reality. So the metaverse is here, and the question is, where does the metaverse stop, and what's real? So how do we delineate? So definitely metaverse is an exciting part of it, because we can make things more efficiently. I visited Hong Kong a few months ago, and I spoke with one of our builders there, and he sold his solution, VR solution, to a bank, and bank over there in Hong Kong is educating kids in kindergartens how to become more financially literate. So this is also exciting. So even before kids, like preschool kids, enter their adulthood, they'll be able to, be much more financially savvy than we were or our parents were. So yeah, I find metaverse extremely exciting also.
I'm glad you mentioned that. We have, that's interesting to do in a kindergarten, because we have an epidemic here in the U.S. where I would say 80% of the country is not financially literate, because they don't teach that at all, in our schools. And how do we create a world where you think that everybody can be financially literate? It starts with knowledge sharing, but how do we get there? Any thoughts?
Yeah, in a way, it does feel to me, at least, that entering the Web3 space, the crypto space, also teaches you to become even more financially literate than you would have been in the in the normal world. And to me, it even seems that the governing structures do not want people to be too literate when it comes to financial decisions. I think many people would go nuts if they really understood the purposes and how money is being spent by the government. So I'm even skeptical if governments want their people to be financially literate, to be honest. So I think in a way, it is becoming a burden of parents to make sure that their kids receive good education and also become financially literate.
Yeah, I was having conversations with my 14-year-old and my 11-year-old yesterday, and telling them that the price of Bitcoin was like 65,000 at 11:30 a.m. and at noon it was 55,000. Like, it dropped down 10,000. I trying to explain to them what leverage longs were, liquidations. And they didn't get it, but I keep trying to explain. They'll get it someday.
Yeah. No,
So,
I envy them. Even, I mean, I met a few people. I mean, I used to be young in crypto, but now I'm becoming, that old fella who's been in crypto for, I don't know, 7-8 years. And now I see some people, the Gen Z people, coming into crypto, and they're far more sophisticated and advanced than I was when I entered crypto. And I think this new generation is going to bring a lot of benefits to the space.
I agree. So I want to thank you very much for your time today. I enjoyed speaking with you, and yeah, this is a wonderful conversation. And I have one last question. It's an easy one. It's, how can people find out more information about you, about Trace Labs, about OriginTrail? How can they do that?
Yeah, they could go to OriginTrail.io. If they want to get engaged in community, they can simply go to Telegram, join the bunch there. People are really helpful and friendly, whatever question they have. They can also find me on Twitter, DREVZIGA. And yeah, I'm happy to take on any other chance that I might have in the future to chat with you. And thank you for having me, Jamil.
Awesome. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks a lot.